What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video for the First Descendant today, we are looking at Python, which is a submachine gun of the ultimate variety in the game. Now during the first part of the video like this, I usually have a showcase and I kind of like try to sell the weapon to you and explain to you what it does well and some of the things that I enjoy about it. However, it's a little bit difficult for me with Python, and that's because in the current weapon economy of the game, we have such strong meta options that are available that really should be a priority for you to develop, that Python severely slips down sort of like the list of weapons that you should absolutely be concentrating to get ready to go. With the likes of Albion Cavalry Gun, Excava, Thunder Cage, Enduring Legacy, Smithereens, Last Dagger, and Restored Relic and so on being the meta choices right now. The issue is that while Python is a perfectly serviceable submachine gun, it just does not compete with those weapons. And so to someone with limited resources who basically has no interest whatsoever in developing every single weapon in the game, I just simply cannot recommend Python. Now, if you're one of the 5 people that religiously run Python exclusively, you might be looking at this going like, is this motherfucker crazy? Like, Python's the best gun in the game. Why is he saying all this shit? Well, in that case, I would urge you to continue on using Python. Use what you enjoy playing with after all. But I do want to be upfront and honest and say that I'm not going to try and gas you up and tell you Python's the best thing since sliced bread, because it isn't. That being said, I am a guide-based channel and I make guides for things in games and I make guides for all of the weapons. So this is a case of putting this guide out there. This is a level 10 core Python set up the way that I have set it up and the way that I use it. And if you are interested in building Python out, this is a viable build for you to be able to deal some decent damage with it. Now let's go ahead and start off by looking at the unique ability first. And pretty much it is about as straightforward as it comes. It's called Python Instinct, and when you hit a weak point, weak points are very much a thing that Python likes. You have excellent weak point damage, and it's what we're also going to build this for. So when you hit a weak point, it inflicts a unique ability called Prey, which is a debuff on the enemy that you're hitting. What this does is it has a 2-second duration. It can stack up to 28 times, and it reduces the resistance of the enemy's non-attribute as well as toxin resistance. Okay, and then what you're also doing is the stacks will just further undo this. So this, by the time you have all 28 stacks on the enemy, completely crushes those 2 resistances. So while this is very much seen as a toxic weapon, you do also have to bear in mind that this can reduce non-attribute resistance as well, which is very helpful for descendants like Valby and Ajax who deal that form of damage. So this can be a way for you to debuff enemies so that you can actually deal more damage with your skills to them. So, I mean, Jabo also deals non-attribute, but let's not talk about that motherfucker. All right, so then we're going to jump into the actual mods themselves. Now, I've mentioned already that I mean, in the game right now, there's factually 2 submachine guns to talk about, and it's Python, and then it's, of course, Thunder Cage. Thunder Cage is very much flavored towards playing it crit. It's really good at that, and you should absolutely build it crit. But Python is the exact opposite. Python's base stats for firearm critical hit rate and firearm critical hit damage are abysmally low. And so it's far better suited to building it into weak point damage since it starts with a 2x multiplier already, which is really damn good. We're going to start off with the usual stuff, right? So that means we're going to go action and reaction, and we're going to go rifling, right? These 2 are the kind of cornerstone of every build because both of them give firearm attack, which is obviously damage, and action reaction gives you a slight recoil deficit there, making your recoil a little bit more profound or pronounced, but it's really not a problem since the 61% firearm attack is super dope. Now, next, we would usually put fire rate into the weapon, but the issue is that Python has a ridiculously high base fire rate already. So let me just go back there again. If we look at the base value, it's 923, all right? And this is without any like substats or mods or anything like that on it. So it already starts with a super high fire rate. And it's a good idea to try and stay below 1,000 unless you want the game to, you know, basically start deleting your bullets. This is, of course, tied to your frame rate. So this is even worse for console players. I believe I play on PC, so 1,000 is kind of like my cutoff. This is something that has been mentioned by the developer that it's obviously a fuck up. And hopefully we can look at down the line this being addressed, because Python's one of those guns that it would be really interesting to just push its fire rate as far as we can go and see what we end up with. Because it starts so high, it would be interesting to end up with something that basically just spews lava. So unfortunately for now, we can't put fire rate in because 923 is already pretty damn high. So we're just going to leave it right there. Now, at this point in time, we want to attack three things. We want to have more weak point damage. We want to have more toxic damage. And we want to have more magazine capacity. So let's do magazine capacity first. So for that, we're going to go expand weapon charge, which is more rounds in the magazine. And then we're also going to put on another one there because we're fucking crazy like that. We're going to put on maximize weight balance. Now, the reason why we put this on is because this there is another one that gives us firearm attack of 1%. Then there's another one that gives us critical hit damage 6.5%. We don't care about that shit. So we'll take this one. It gives us weak point damage plus 2%. Whoop-de-doo. But it does give us 30% additional rounds, which is lovely. Then we are going to go for our element. Okay, so first things first, toxic enhancement slaps in there. Now also bear in mind that by default, Python deals toxic damage. That's its inherent element. So we're just, adding more on top of that. This gets, sort of paired very well with something called poison priority. And what that then does for us is it gives us 50% additional toxic attack, but now slightly, affects our reload time modifier. This is a submachine gun, so your reloads are blisteringly fast. So this should not be something that deters you from using this. And then last but not least, or maybe we'll leave this last mod for the end. Okay, so I'll circle back on that. We can also put in something called charge amplification. Since we don't care about critical hit damage and critical hit rate, we can put this in because this gives us a very decent bump to firearm attack, although it tanks our firearm critical hit damage. So that's fine. Now we're starting to see some decent firearm attack getting stacked onto the weapon. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is weak point damage. So we absolutely want to put in this over here, weak point sight. That's going to give us 35% additional damage to weak points. And then we can also put in something called have aiming. Now, you have to bear in mind that have aiming, it does give you a massive amount of weak point damage, but then also just kind of like makes your accuracy like very poopies. So the problem is that you already have a kind of like a problem with this weapon hitting, just because it has a massive reticule, right? So on console, I think this might be something that annoys people and so on. I know that have aiming is kind of like generally speaking, it's a mod that I avoid purely for that reason. But that being said, you are spitting out a shitload of bullets, and the point is to, you basically got like 100 rounds on the gun. So if you just hit like 28 of those, you have the maximum effect of your debuff on the enemy. So that's gonna be okay. You should be able to hit it. I believe in you. But that being said, if you want to put something else in there and then not lose some accuracy, then of course that's entirely up to you. Like I said, from a console player's perspective, that might be an instant deny to use something like have aiming. For the last slot, we can consider this a flex slot, and that's because there's a couple of different mods that I can suggest for you to potentially use there. The ones that you've been seeing running in the background has been with Toxic Conductor. Toxic Conductor says when attacking enemies inflicted with poison, firearm attack plus 26%. Now, our gun, of course, poisons enemies. So the idea here being that the minute that you put that status effect onto them, then you'll get this additional firearm attack plus 26%. Another really strong choice as well is Sweeping Squad, because technically speaking, you are almost using this in a mobbing setup and then using it to, burn down yellow bars. So as long as there are enemies dying around you, you'll always have this sort of like massive increase to your firearm attack. The only issue being that when you get to a boss or something like that, it's possible that the boss will not have any adds around them and you won't benefit from this. But that being said, most bosses in their second phase summon adds, and then you can get a nice little ramp again in terms of dealing damage to them. Sharp Precision Shot, unfortunately, while it does take your fire rate down by 20%, when you do ramp it fully, it does get you over 1,000 bullets per second. And then of course you run into the issue where it's bullet deletus maximus. But that might be a non-point for you because you do actually get a pretty decent ramp from that. So again, like I said, if you don't really give a shit about some of your bullets being deleted, then that's a good ramp for you. We also need to discuss Mental Focus as a ramp as well, because the point is, while you will never actually get the full 150 stacks, the point is that we do have 102 bullets in the magazine, which means that you can get about 66% of that bonus, and that's also a decent avenue for boost for you. But like I said, the footage that you've been seeing has been Toxic Conductor, and that's kind of like the way that I run this. Next up, we have Substats. So for this, again, because we're not running critical hit rate or critical hit damage, it kind of opens it up to some other slots. For here, we're taking firearm attack, we're taking toxic attack, which just adds more to our toxic damage. We're taking weak point damage, and we're taking rounds per magazine, which is another thing that kind of gets us to that 102 rounds. Next up is cores. And the core distribution for Python is really sexy, to be honest. It has a free augmentation, a firepower augmentation, a tactical augmentation, and 2 precisions. For the 2 precisions, it's absolutely a no-brainer. One of them you put sprint speed, and the other one you put grappling hook charge time increase. With this particular configuration you have here, you have a very fast run speed for your character by default, which is very nice. And then with this grapple hook charge time increase, you can essentially stay in the air permanently with mid grappling, and it just gives a lot of quality of life to the weapon and makes it feel really awesome. You're basically like fucking Spider-Man. Then from a tactical rounds perspective, you have some options here. You have fire rate, which in this case is a no-no, and we have rounds per magazine, which in this case is a yummy. So we can go all the way up to 150%, which is another reason why we get to 102 bullets in the magazine, which ultimately is kind of insane for a submachine gun. For our firepower augmentation, we have 2 choices: firearm attack and bonus firearm attack versus Colossus. If you want to use this as a Colossus weapon, feel free, but there are literally a fucking list of weapons which are better for killing Colossi than this gun. So firearm attack is the one that you actually want here if you just want to use it in a mobbing capacity and dealing as much damage as possible when you do that. For your free augmentation, there's a couple of different things you can do here, but I wanted to double up on firearm attack so that I could get the most bang for my buck and basically make sure that the weapon deals a decent amount of damage. Always remember your inversion reinforcement options if you just want to stack on a little bit of additional toxic rounds damage on there, or if you want to put another element onto it so it deals 2 elements at the same time. That's of course an option to you. And then let me just quickly flash my 400% infiltration build that I use specifically for Freyna. It's a contagion build. I do have a dedicated Freyna build video for this, but I just include this just in case you like what you see here and you want to go do some 400s with Freyna. This is vintage Freyna, good old shit. Deals a bunch of damage, just melts your way through all of the enemies with no problem whatsoever. And then every once in a while, when you run into a yellow bar that's looking for some bullshit, you just show him your Python and he's gonna leave. But that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, let me know in the comments down below if you have any additional questions, anything that I didn't cover with this. Thanks for all the support. I appreciate each and every one of you. Until next video, fucking cheers.